on our screens once more, this time round with the 13th Doctor as portrayed by Jodie Whittaker, and today I'm going to be taking a look at the first episode of Doctor Who Series 11, which is of course The Woman Who Fell to Earth, written by the brand new head writer, which is of course Chris Chibnall. It has been a long time coming. Of course, throughout the entirety of 2018 we have had lots and lots of people wanting information, wanting trailers, wanting spoilers for many months. However, I think that it's fair to say that this time around the BBC has done it quite differently, and we don't really know too much about this upcoming series of Doctor Who, which makes it incredibly interesting indeed. It actually means that, as aside from a few leaks here and there, we actually have quite an unknown set of adventures on the way, which I think is certainly a lot more exciting than the previous years that we've had Doctor Who, where pretty much every single major villain and every single plot point has been revealed in advance. Of course, this episode of Doctor Who was very important indeed, because it is of course the debut of our first ever female incarnation of the Doctor, of course as portrayed by Jodie Whittaker, the 13th Doctor. And for me, I think that post-regeneration stories are always very unusual, because a lot of people do in fact always judge this new Doctor by the first ever story, but we of course know from the previous new series post-regeneration stories that the Doctor does seem to be quite eccentric and unusual within his first episode, because he is of course recovering from the regeneration and the illness and side effects from that. So I think if anything, from what we've seen in this story, Jodie Whittaker's Doctor is just going to progress onto something else as the episodes kind of hit our TV screens each week. Actually, before I even get into this review, I am going to state, if you haven't seen The Woman Who Fell to Earth yet, 1, what are you doing with your life, and 2, go and watch it now before you actually watch this video, because it isn't going to be spoiler free. I am going to ruin some of the plot points, and to be honest, I think that all of you have probably watched it by now anyway. But firstly, covering something on kind of a personal level, of course with the channel I've never actually done any Series 11 content. I did do a video actually sort of responding to the announcement of the 13th Doctor being Jodie Whittaker, our first ever female incarnation, and other than that, I've not really done any videos dedicated to the new series whatsoever. If anything, I've gone on a little bit of a break from the TV show itself, because there is a lot of other media that I can of course review, from the books and audio dramas and things like that. However, I wanted to do something different with Series 11 and basically not do any expectations or anything like that, because I kind of feel like regardless, we kind of have these hopes and we kind of have it build over time, and then when the actual series comes around the corner, sort of some of those hopes can be crushed. So I think if anything, it was kind of best just to go into this series with an open mind and to kind of see what happens, because after all, this is a restart. Chris Chibnall and the production team did in fact say before this series aired that they wanted this part of the series to be a jumping on point. You don't need to see Doctor Who beforehand in order to watch it and understand it, and I think that is a perfect thing, considering that you are bringing in a brand new Doctor, and it is of course a female Doctor. Naturally you are going to have people tuning in that have never seen Doctor Who before, or if anything, you're going to have people that are curious fans that have sort of left Doctor Who behind a few years ago and kind of want to give it a second chance. There is in fact a few elements throughout this story that have been altered a little bit in order to kind of correspond with that new fraction of the audience that they're kind of hoping to hook, which I think if anything, that's a good thing. Of course this episode did get around 8 million views I think on the original airing, so the highest viewing figures that we've seen since Time of the Doctor, when the 11th Doctor regenerated a few years back. And yeah, I think that was expected regardless, because it's the first story of the new female Doctor and people are going to tune in because they want to see how exactly it is going to work, even though it's not really much of a difference. It's just the fact that it's a woman that's now playing a role that used to be a man. At the end of the day, she's a time-travelling alien, so she's quite different anyway, and really in reality, gender's not really that much of a big thing. It is a bunch of cells that is different. And I think that regardless, if you've got a good actor, they're going to do a good job as long as they're given good writing. But that is kind of a decent point to go on to Jodie Whittaker as the 13th Doctor, and I must say that once again, she did a great job throughout this story. She was a rather interesting version of the 13th Doctor. I didn't really know what I was going to expect. I think that if anything, I've kind of got used to Jodie as a person as opposed to her playing the actual Doctor, and I think that there is certainly an aspect around her Doctor that is a little bit more personal to her. Of course, she has kept her natural accent, her northern accent from Huddersfield, so that's leading to a rather interesting northern version of the Doctor. Previously we've seen the 9th Doctor with a northern accent, so it's nice that she's retained that. Quite likeable. I think there are certain aspects throughout this story where I actually found myself laughing around the things that she was saying, such as the Tim Shaw gag when we first seen the alien in the episode. I found that genuinely funny, and then also the bit where she says, "I'm an alien and I'm on a train to Graham" in the early half of the episode. I found that quite nice as well, well, quite quirky, quite unusual, and she's kind of that nice boundary between having this person from outer space, but also at the same time somebody of which that you can kind of tell that she's going to be very sort of in keeping within her family of companions that she now has, and probably should be very much a part of their lives. Because I think that certainly towards the later half of this story, I don't know if it was just me, but I found it unusual that the Doctor actually stayed behind with the friends that she's made around for Ryan's grandma's funeral, which I thought that was unusual. We never normally see that throughout Doctor Who, because he normally turns down social occasions, even though it's a funeral, but hey, it's kind of still quite a big step for Doctor Who, and something of which that I've not really seen too much beforehand. It's normally only those big characters the Doctor ends up going to kind of the funeral of. I like Jodie so far, she's great. I can't really think of anything about her character that I don't actually like. I think that if anything, there is a few moments maybe here and there where she kind of slipped out of the character a little bit, or to me it kind of felt like the lines that she delivered sounded a little bit unusual, almost like they were being read off a script. And I do think that over time this will progress. Of course, this is a big major step for Jodie, considering that she's done Broadchurch beforehand, that human gritty detective drama that is more about crying and like children dying and stuff. But her in Black Mirror as well, which is once again a rather emotionally based story, I do believe around family from what I can remember. She was great in once again, but the Doctor role is something completely different from what she's done before. The fact that she's doing stunts and things like that is completely different. And yeah, I liked her kind of stepping into the shoes of the Doctor. There are some wonderful moments throughout this story where she says and explains about regeneration to her new friends. I loved the moment when she said it's almost like you're dying, and then in that last minute you're born again. I thought that was some really lovely writing. Excited to see how she's going to progress throughout the series into a different version of the Doctor, because I think that it is certain that she's going to be rather upbeat, rather fast, maybe a little bit like the 10th Doctor in that way, maybe a little bit like the 4th Doctor as well, but she almost has an innocent side behind her, a little bit like the 5th Doctor. So there is a few harkbacks in there to the previous incarnations, I feel. But yeah, I think that at the end of the day, she's going to be a Doctor in her own right, and she's certainly going to have her own style. On to the characters for this series, because we now have a TARDIS team, which is something of which that we've not really seen too regularly throughout new series Doctor Who. We've seen it last, I do believe, in Boomtown in series 1 and kind of the later half of the 9th Doctor era. And Sinclair, the first character that we kind of got introduced to throughout this story. Of course, he is a rather interesting character. He's around 19 years old. The story does in fact affect him on a personal level. Of course, he has previously lost his mum, now he has lost his grandma at the very end of this episode, and I love the idea of him talking to the camera, much like how I'm doing now. Technology. But it's kind of a nice little way to introduce the character, and I feel like the opening part of this story was certainly introduced through his eyes, and I did quite like that. It was very unusual to have a debut story for a new Doctor and essentially not see them for the first 10 or so minutes, and then the entrance that Jodie actually makes is brilliant. I love the music where she kind of hops up and we have that almost altered, remastered version of the Doctor Who theme. I thought that was great. But I do like Ryan. I think that he's quite a likeable character. Of course, he suffers from dyspraxia, I do believe it's called. Probably pronounced that a little bit wrong, but from what I understand, it's basically a bit of an illness where you don't really have coordination, or you have a lack in coordination, and like that. I think that that's really good for a Doctor Who companion to in fact have a problem with them that of course they are trying to resolve, because we don't really see that throughout Doctor Who. I don't think we've ever seen a new series companion with a disability to that extent. So I think that that is something that is once again engaging to the audience. No doubt somebody will relate to that. So Graham as well, by the Chase's very own Bradley Walsh, who has previously done Law and Order UK. He's an excellent actor. Once that some of the best moments throughout this episode were in fact delivered by him, such as the funeral at the very end of the episode, where he is discussing Grizz as a character and sort of saying how they had 3 wonderful years together. I thought that was lovely, and I think that Bradley Walsh is certainly underestimated when it comes to an actor. I think that some people just see him as somebody from the Chase, and they've not seen him in Law and Order UK. He was a very interesting character in that as well, a brilliant detective character. I did like the way that he was a recovering cancer patient or something. He's not actually been fully let off yet, which is interesting. The fact that they've decided to sort of give him that illness in the past, but they've not fully let it kind of take its course. He's either survived or not. He's kind of in the questionable zone where it may be dormant or something. I like that because once again it has a little bit of mystery, and maybe, who knows, he might go on all of these adventures and then by the very end the one thing that actually ends his life is in fact a human illness. That would be quite sort of sad and once again very much like reality, I think. But yeah, on to Yaz, who is of course Yasmin Khan, however you want to say her name. She's played by Mandeep Gilp. Of course, Ryan was played by Tosin Cole as well, as I forgot to mention. I think that Mandeep did, in fact, once again, interesting character. I like the fact that she's younger. She is sort of in 2 years, I do believe, of training to be a police officer, and she wants to do more interesting crimes and opposed to just like parking disputes and things like that. I like the fact that she's a police officer, and I'm hoping that that is intertwined into a later story because I feel like that has endless possibilities around it. You could have an interesting sort of crime story, maybe with a serial killer or something, or some serial crimes that are going on, and it turns out that there's a villain behind it or something like that. That would be interesting. I do fear that we're never going to see that police officer career side of her again because I feel like that's something that might be forgotten over time. But at the same time, in this episode, I don't really feel like I got to know Yasmin as a character. I kind of felt like she was there, she was enjoyable, and the scenes that she had with the 13th Doctor were nice, but the episode was certainly aimed around Ryan a bit more, and she didn't really have too much about her that was personal. I didn't really have a reason to like her, so I'm hoping in the later episodes, maybe even the next one, the episode is less based around Ryan and more based around Yaz, because she certainly needs a little bit more time in order to develop her character and maybe just make a few more challenges in order for her to come out her shell a little bit more, because I kind of feel like she's a mysterious figure at the minute, which doesn't really have much of a life story behind her. We have Grace, of course, the woman who fell to Earth herself, who did, of course, die at the very end of this episode, and a lot of people apparently clicked onto the fact that she wasn't going to last past this story or something because she wasn't in the credits for other episodes. I didn't look into that, so I didn't know. It was a complete surprise that she, in fact, died at the end of the episode, and without sounding bleak, I really liked it. I thought that that's a great way to, in fact, introduce a Doctor. If anything, I would have liked the death to be a bit more emotional because I kind of felt like Ryan was just in shock, which is then again a bit more relatable to some extent. But yeah, I liked her character, I liked her relationship with Graham, and I just hope that she doesn't come back now because a lot of people are saying that they want her back, but I really don't want that to happen because once again it will take away from the story. It will be something that Moffat would probably do, and I feel that kind of throughout the whole story everybody else got at least a little bit of development, but with her she didn't, so you kind of felt like maybe she was going to leave at the end of the episode. But hey, she was a nice character, enjoyable once again, and that kind of completes the TARDIS team. Now moving on to the narrative and storyline of the woman who fell to Earth. Now I am going to cover a few of the other characters that I've not mentioned as of yet, as I kind of come on to the certain aspects of the story. And I kind of feel like post-regeneration stories are really unusual because you do naturally want to aim a little bit more around the Doctor and them finding out who they are, which is certainly something that is used in this story. However, we do have some interesting components tucked away. Naturally, when it comes to a post-regeneration episode, such as say the 11th Hour or Deep Breath, you normally have the reveal of the new sonic screwdriver, the reveal of the new Doctor, and then you have the reveal of the new TARDIS and the new companions actually coming onto the TARDIS set for the first ever time, along with, as well, from behind the scenes perspective, you normally have the new music and the new theme tune with the new visuals, and that is something that in this episode that the production team have took a very bold decision in fact taking out the majority of those components and only having the new Doctor and the new sonic screwdriver and the new companions. Instead, we don't have a preview of the new TARDIS whatsoever, which I think is the first ever time that has in fact occurred in a new series Doctor Who story, from what I can remember. We've not in fact seen the TARDIS at all, not even on set, because it is of course in space somewhere, so we are still yet to see the brand new TARDIS console room, so no doubt that will come in later episodes. And I like the fact that that is being prolonged because it kind of means that there is more to look forward to in the upcoming episodes. Of course, we have the new sonic screwdriver, which has had a lot of debate behind it. It's one of the earliest things we in fact got to know about around series 11, of course, because the actual toy came out that I did review. And yeah, there was a lot of debate around if it was good or not, but I do generally like the story behind it. I love the fact that Jodie actually built it in the story itself and it was made out of Sheffield steel. I thought that was great. Even having the little spoon insignia on, I thought that was a lovely little touch. But yeah, generally, the narrative of a post-regeneration episode is always very unusual, as I said, because it is focused around the new Doctor a little bit more, as opposed to the actual villain. In this episode, we do have Tim Shaw, or as I'm going to pronounce his name, because it is pronounced slightly differently in sort of alien language, is Tazam Shah of the Stenza, which I feel like his character, it will be fair to say, is kind of undeveloped. I think that he was a great design. It was very unique. It was very different. I love the fact that he had all the teeth on his face, and obviously his main task throughout the episode was he's been sent on an expedition from his rather cold-looking planet in order to kill a certain person and take the trophy back to their planet in order to basically seek the leadership role of that planet. I think that is a rather interesting ritual. It's something different, but once again, I kind of feel like the actual aspect of that was really underplayed because, as I said, the majority of the storyline was focused around the 13th Doctor. And I think that if Tim Shaw was in fact going to be used at any other point throughout this series, it would be bad. It wouldn't work whatsoever because he is essentially just a villain that is there to fill that gap in order to give a first threat for the Doctor. And I must admit, he was in fact a good threat for the Doctor to start with. I feel like he was a rather deadly villain. I love the fact that people died throughout this episode because if you think about it, we had Grace, we had that security guard that we didn't even know. Then we had the kebab guy, how could I forget him? Then we have Raoul, of course, who does the mechanic workshop. And of course, all of those people, in fact, had their jaw dislocated and a tooth removed. And I love the fact, I'm going to sound incredibly dark here, but I love the fact that we didn't, of course, see them breaking the jaw. But if you listen carefully, you do, in fact, have the sound effect crack of them twisting the jaw and then removing the tooth. And that is, of course, out of shot when Tim Shaw does that. And I like that. It's bringing in an adult element to the series for those of you that are the older viewers that like the more sort of gory version of Doctor Who. It kind of gives them a little bit of something to like throughout the story, but also at the same time for the younger audience, it kind of leaves it to the imagination and they can kind of choose to ignore it if they so wish. Because I must admit, I didn't really realise the actual crack of the jaw sound effect until around the second or third time listening. So yeah, I think that if you just watch this sort of once or twice, you won't really recognise it, but I do like that that is included. Same with how the Doctor and the companions actually seen the body at the start of the episode and kind of how horrific that was. I like the fact it was referenced. Of course, they wouldn't actually be able to show it, but the simple fact that it is referenced throughout the story actually shows that maybe this new series of Doctor Who is going in a different direction, and the fact, I think, that a lot of people died throughout this episode kind of proves that. It shows that the villain is deadly, and it also shows that they kind of mean business as well. I think that Chris Chibnall did a really interesting thing throughout this story where we didn't really know what was going on. We kind of were left in the dark throughout the majority of the early half, and then as the Doctor found things out, we kind of learnt from the Doctor's perspective, kind of going along with the investigation with them. We didn't really know anything other than what the actual characters did, which was something that very much did occur throughout the Moffat era. We kind of knew exactly what was going on, and kind of the only people that were left in the dark was the characters within the actual story. But I like the fact that it kept you guessing, why have we got this weird onion-looking blue thing in a forest? Why is it now being took to a mechanic workshop? And then from there, what is the villain? What do they want? What is this coil thing that's kind of going around Sheffield? I thought that was very unusual. And then you have the villain itself. What was his aims? I kind of felt like that was a really nice way that that was delivered throughout the story. However, I did feel that some of the script throughout the story, when delivering those mysteries, was in fact a little bit clunky and a little bit slapdash, where you kind of felt like, why is the character saying that? And it kind of felt like that was the way of Chris Chibnall sort of delivering the actual plot of the story directly to the viewer. It didn't really leave too much to the imagination, and I just kind of felt like a lot of the sort of questions were a little bit off. It did start in the very early half of the story when anybody's seen anything sort of unusual tonight, and then it kind of went on from there. Then we had the stuff in the workshop. Why is the alien doing this? What is his plan? And then even the Doctor says in response to that, these are all good questions. It kind of felt a little bit like we were breaking the fourth wall, and it just kind of felt like Chibnall was spoon-feeding the viewer kind of the information, just in case if they kind of lost the story at this point and kind of was a little bit confused. Here we have a few questions to kind of put you back on track and direct you to the part of the story that maybe you were so missing by this point. So yeah, I did find that a bit odd, and I hope that it's changed throughout the other stories because it was very easy to follow, and I think that the questions made it even easier to follow, but at the same time it took me out of the story and it felt a little bit just off, and like it wasn't meant to be there, and like the characters were kind of coming out of their role a little bit, and instead just reading off the aims of the story. I want to do some of the production stuff because quite frankly I want to talk about it now. I'll return to the narrative a little bit later because it is a very important part of the episode. this looks completely different to previous series of Doctor Who. I do almost feel like throughout the Moffat era, as opposed to a few episodes here and there, pretty much all the ones directed by Rachel Taylor, to be honest, were lovely. They looked great, looked visually experimental. However, a lot of the 12th Doctor stories and a lot of the 11th Doctor stories in the later half as well just seemed dry, boring. They didn't have any direction whatsoever that was interesting. However, this episode takes on a completely different front. It was something of which that we knew once again was going to occur throughout Series 11, because the production team and Chibnall had this aim to basically make Series 11 look a lot more cinematic. For a start, they've updated the lenses. I'm not going to go into technical details, but basically it's now wider shots and it looks more cinematic and it looks more nice, and it certainly works because every single time you have a landscape shot, for a start, the great contrasts of having the countryside of the peaks landscape at the very start of the episode and then moving that to the more industrial urban location of Sheffield, I thought that was great. The episode was constantly reminding you that you weren't in sort of London as you normally are with new series Doctor Who in modern day. You in fact are in the north, as sort of supported by the accents as well. And I think that some of the choice in scenes, the way that we had the van going through the industrial estate by the stadium, was a great choice. And yeah, I kind of felt like the whole production of this story was a lot more sort of up to date, a lot more 21st century. It certainly looked a lot more like 21st century science fiction. I kind of feel like this could compete with online streaming services such as Netflix and things that are modern on actual streaming services such as that are generally popular TV shows today, such as Bodyguard and Killing Eve, for example, that have recently aired on the BBC. All of those looked incredibly modern, and I kind of feel like Doctor Who, for the first time in many, many years, has in fact supported a visually looking modern sort of story. All that is generally responsible down to Jamie Childs, who did direct this episode. The way that you had the different depths of fields, the way that it was focused, everything was great. It looked visually stunning no matter what. Even if the actual episode was absolutely rubbish, I think I would come out of the episode actually saying, regardless of it being rubbish, it looked brilliant. A little bit like Sleep No More in that way, because that had some nice CGI. It's just a shame that the actual narrative was a little bit of a letdown. Of course, also about behind the scenes, Segun Akinola, he is of course the composer of the brand new music, and honestly, I'm just gonna this is me praising you apparently, he's absolutely bloody flawless. Had of course Murray Gold for many, many years, and he was once again, much like the directing, running dry and running still for the majority of sort of the 11th Doctor era and 12th Doctor era. We had reuses of music all the time, and then in this episode we had a really refreshing music score. It felt brilliant, it felt really cold in some aspects, and it kind of felt like the episode was actually tuned to the music. It suited it brilliantly. I loved the music of where Tim Shaw came in and kind of that drum beat sound effect. That was brilliant. And I also loved the scene at the very end of the story with the crane of having the Doctor saying, "Oh, I'm glad that you asked me again," and then you have a little bit of adrenaline, a little bit of worry, and the music behind that, and then she says that "I am the Doctor" phrase. I think that the music behind that was wonderful. I'm looking forward to see a full composition of the 13th Doctor's theme, because I have a feeling that that might have been an aspect of it. And yet, Segun is basically once again flawless, much like the actual directing. I loved it. And then we have the actual theme itself, something of which that I will talk about more in episode 2's review of the Ghost Monument, because we haven't in fact seen the opening of this series yet, but we did in fact have a little bit of the closing credits. The theme itself is once again a hark back to 1960s Doctor Who and the Radiophonic Workshop and Ron Grainer. It is a lot more classic and it is a lot darker as well, and it looks great. I'm just looking forward. I'll probably comment on it more in the next review because I'll have more to say about it. But yeah, it was really nicely presented, and the vortex behind in the end credits looked quite dark and interesting as well. And then you of course had the Coming Soon trailer that was delivered in a brand new style with the Doctor Who theme running across the top, which was unique once again, very cinematic, and something that I would imagine being on an online streaming service. And I just hope that maybe even halfway through Series 11, if not directly as soon as it ends, the BBC sign a deal with Netflix maybe and allow permission for the new series of Doctor Who to immediately go onto Netflix, because I feel like that is going to be a way to get a second-hand audience of more people from different countries. I think that may in fact boost the sales of this series as well as the next series as well, just generate a bit more interest, because I am aware that the previous series of Doctor Who did have quite a big delay in actually going onto Netflix, and I feel like that is quite an issue, to be honest. And I feel like, as well, Doctor Who on social media, which is something very much that is referenced throughout this story, the fact that we were using Twitter, the fact that we were using iPhones, the fact that there was even a mention to WhatsApp, it shows that there has been a big shift in the actual sort of use of technology today in this episode of Doctor Who, and that's going to be something that will reoccur throughout the later episodes, and also the way that that is actually being reflected in Doctor Who's presentation over social media as well. I've noticed that it's been a lot more active, a lot more interesting, something of which, once again, we didn't see throughout the 12th Doctor era, and I think that that can be supported throughout the promotional material that we've seen in the last few months as well. To stop talking about the promotional side of things now, kind of the way that this episode looks, because I do think that it was a very big part of this episode, it must be said. Therefore, it did kind of deserve its own time to be dedicated around it. But yeah, the actual narrative itself is interesting. Once again, it's quite slow in pace, but at the same time, I kind of feel like it's structured quite nicely. I like the fact that the episode ends around 10 minutes before the actual ending, and we have that time to breathe at the very end of the story, where we have the funeral, the Doctor getting his new clothes. I did it again. He gets his new clothes. She gets her new clothes. At the very end of the episode, we have them going off into space for the first adventure via the Stenza teleport. And I do think that, yeah, it's an interesting story for a post-regeneration. Naturally, there will be a lot of positivity around it because of we have this original hype going around, which is why I wanted to leave it a few days before I actually end up reviewing it. Because if I end up reviewing every single episode immediately after it airs, every single review will probably be quite positive because there will be a hype behind it. But I do feel like this episode is nice. It's got a good story behind it. Of course, introducing the Doctor, which is the most important point, and introducing the companions. And we have the interesting character of the sub-villain in there as well, Tim Shaw, which was a nice, funny villain. I love the fact of the teeth and everything like that. I thought that was great. But the actual aspect of his alien character was really underplayed. And I kind of feel like sort of it would have been nice to maybe go into that a bit more, which is naturally something that will occur in a post-regeneration story, as I say, which can't exactly be helped. And of course this episode does offer a lot of differences as well. I don't know if it's anybody else's opinion, but I like the fact that this episode kind of featured urban sort of locations. The sheer fact it had trains in it as well. I don't know why, but I was really excited by the fact that this story had a train in, because I kind of feel like we don't have that in Doctor Who these days. You don't have normal modern things, and then even the Doctor going in the police car and kind of being in the car with all of her future companions, I thought that was nice and once again quite modern and different. And even the fact of just seeing buses, I don't know what it is, but I just found the modern aspects of this episode really nice to watch, and it felt different and it felt completely new, and something of which that kind of makes the 12th Doctor era now feel a long time ago. Really, in reality, it was only an episode ago, which I think is personally a really good way to in fact do a reboot, because it feels fresh and new instantly, and you almost forget the previous series or two beforehand, which means that it is a really good jumping on point, as I say. I do think that it is great for the newcomers. I'm just hoping that the rest of this series kind of continues in this nice delivery, nice visual representations. I'm just hoping that a lot of effort hasn't just gone into this opening story, and then from here onwards it's kind of like a downward spiral, because that is something that did occur throughout the Moffat era once again, but I suppose only time will tell. That is my review of The Woman Who Fell to Earth. I'm not going to cover absolutely every single aspect, as no doubt I'll probably reference it in the future reviews as well. But generally, as I say, nice story, nice narrative, looks visually impressive, sounds absolutely gorgeous. I'm looking forward to see where this series goes. If anything, there's just a few issues here and there, such as the clunky vocabulary, the lacking development of Yasmin so far, which hopefully both of those will be fixed in the future. And yeah, let's just see where the series goes. I'm going to be positive in my outlook, and I think that generally Jodie Whittaker has done a really brilliant debut story. And yeah, I think that if anything, I'm full positivity for her, and I'm just hoping that the rest of the fandom kind of gets behind her as well. So yeah, that is it for this review. Hope you've enjoyed it. What is your opinion of The Woman Who Fell to Earth? Did you enjoy it? What was the parts that you liked the most? Was there any parts of it that you would improve? And what are you looking forward to most for the rest of Series 11? Personally, for me, it is the Rosa Parks story. I'm really excited for that one. I do believe there's episode 3 called Rosa, as it's now just been confirmed this morning. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, that is that for this review. I guess I'll see you all in more Doctor Who content in the near future, including Big Finish, book reviews, product reviews, and every single other thing that I cover on this channel on a weekly basis. Yeah, thanks for watching, and I shall see you all next time. Bye for now.